What is up? I did this as an IG live, but then the app crashed on me and I lost the video. So you're welcome for my OCD and re-recording this as just a regular IGTV. But it's Technique Tuesday. We're gonna be talking about catching the bar low in the snatch, in the barbell snatch. So a question I often get, and this is actually an actual lifter who brought this issue to me. The lifter says, I can overhead squat just fine, but when it comes to full snatching, receiving the bar in a full overhead squat, as it gets heavier, I catch higher. So as the weight gets heavier, this lifter catches higher. Now that's a paradox, because you would think that as the weight gets heavier, you're not gonna be able to pull it as high, so then you in turn have to pull your body lower. But as often is the case with beginner lifters, they end up catching the bar higher and higher the heavier the weight gets. So what's going on here? Well, a lot of times if we bring in motor learning and kind of dynamical systems jargon, they're essentially trying to find a stable movement pattern that their body feels comfortable performing the task. The task is just fixating the bar overhead. There's no rule in weightlifting that you have to catch it low. That's just a performance advantage. As the weight gets heavier, you're not gonna be able to pull as high. So you in turn, if you can pull your body lower and lower, you'll be able to fixate more weight over your head. So sometimes with the beginner who's not comfortable with the skill of snatching, they may catch with their feet really wide, and then they're in that high catch position and their body almost just puts the brakes on, and that's where it feels comfortable. So we might call that their stable attractor state or their stable movement pattern, where their body, essentially their default, where their body kind of gravitates towards. And as coaches, clinicians teaching skills, we're trying to get them to develop a new attractor pattern or a new coordination pattern that allows for improved performance, in this case, catching the bar lower. Now, where do we intervene? It's helpful to try to think of what would be the rate limiting quality that we're dealing with here to try to get the most bang for buck out of our interventions. And there's a lot of information that we can take from what we've been told. This person says, I can overhead squat just fine. So if you take a still shot of somebody in the bottom of an overhead squat, you wouldn't know whether they had just snatched it or whether they had taken it out of a rack and just overhead squatted it. The positions are the same. So if this person is saying that they can overhead squat with load, then they have the range of motion for the task. And this is very important because these same people will be spinning their wheels performing interventions that are meant to increase range of motion. But if you already have the range of motion, you're intervening for a quality that you already have. You're wasting your time there. So that may not tell us what we should do, but it tells us where not to go. And that can be a huge time saver. So in this case, we're thinking more of a coordination skill issue, kind of a motor learning problem. A lot of times at this point, people will go to non-specific things like drills or barbell movements, variations of the snatch that aren't the snatch themselves, or even non-barbell variations to try to teach them how to get under a snatch. I'm gonna flip that on its head and I'm gonna say, if possible, you're gonna get the most bang for buck with the thing itself. So in these cases, many times what you'll find is a lifter has a technique threshold. What I mean by that is there's a certain point where there's enough weight on the bar, they start to do their wonky thing. In this case, catching higher than they were even with lighter weight. So let's say a lifter's 1 rep max snatch is 80 kilos. That was on their absolute best day. They do 40, they do 50, but right around 60 kilos is right where their body starts to kind of lock down and catch high. And it always seems to be right around 60 on average. Now on a good day, maybe 70. On a down day where they feel like they've never snatched in their life, sometimes 30, 40 kilos, 50 kilos is giving them problems with their skill. But the point is, there's a threshold there. Get a lot of your work right there at that threshold, just under it, right at it, trying to nudge it up over time. It needs to be hard enough to challenge you where you really have to be sharp and focused, but it can't be too easy where you don't learn anything, and it can't be too hard where your body just locks down and you can't do anything. Think of wanting to learn algebra. You wouldn't just drop somebody in an advanced calculus class, and you also wouldn't teach them 1 + 1 = 2. Too easy, too hard. These are poles where learning is difficult to occur. It's difficult for learning to occur. So you want to find that sweet spot. That's every single day. Now, you need to be okay with this being a frustrating process because one, you're always right on the edge of doing the thing that annoys you, that you do, which is catching the bar high when you don't want to. So you just have to be okay with constantly one rep being the way you want it, the next rep not. But one rule of thumb that is really useful for learning any skill is just maximizing your exposures per unit time. The snatch really lends itself well to this because it's not a heavy deadlift, it's not a heavy squat. You can get a lot of reps in with minimal fatigue. So maximize your repetitions, maximize your exposures. Yes, there's gonna be errors. That is how learning occurs. So don't be mad at error, say, cool, I know what that feels like. Next rep, you stick it, bam, learning occurs. Also be okay with that technique threshold fluctuating on the day to day. You feel great, you feel super sharp, you're smoking 60. That used to be kind of where things get weird, but now you're smoking it and you're hitting 70 really well on that day. And then 2 days later, you come into the gym, do snatches again, expecting to be at that same place, and it's like you never snatched in your life. You're power snatching 50 when you want to full snatch it. You just have to be okay with those fluctuations because that's just training, that's just readiness. We don't go to the gym and feel strong every day. We have those fluctuations. So it's the same with skill development. You just have to be okay with that. But this concept of just deliberate practice will give you the most bang for buck. And what it also means is don't be married to the numbers or the percentages on the paper. If it says triples at 80% today, but you know at about 60% is where things get weird, don't be in a rush and just get to your working sets and hope everything clicks. Use your lighter sets, use your warm-up sets as your exposures, as your skill practice, as maximizing your reps per unit time. Take smaller jumps. Sometimes it's just too much of a surprise when we add too much weight too soon, and all of a sudden the body reverts back to that default that you're trying to get out of. So take smaller jumps, chip away at that skill, slowly layer on more stress, in this case just load on the bar, but a little at a time so the body can handle it and it doesn't just dip right back into that attractor well, because what we're trying to do is kick you out of that attractor well or that stable default pattern and teach you a new pattern. On the repetitions where you make the error, don't let yourself off the hook. Keep the bar over your head, reset your feet, get your squat in. Make it a habit to always get your overhead squat in no matter what, and just condition yourself that that is what you will do on every snatch rep, whether it's perfect or not. Now, that's big bang for buck. That's going to give you so much return. Now, if you want to throw on variations that'll augment that type of deliberate practice, you might get more transfer there. So anything that's not the thing is going to give you less transfer. But variations like a snatch balance, you can go to YouTube. Catalyst Athletics has a great exercise library. Clinical Athlete YouTube has demo videos. So snatch balance is the bars on your back, dip, drive, and then you're punching yourself under the bar with speed. So we're taking the pull out of the equation. There's a lot of things that can happen from the ground overhead, taking that out of the equation, putting the bar on your back. Now we're just focused on pushing under the bar with speed, with confidence, with intent. A drop snatch, same exact thing, except there's no leg involvement. There's no dip and drive to gather momentum up. Your legs are extended, and then the only move is down. You punch yourself under the bar with confidence, speed, intent. A drop snatch, again, you can look that up on YouTube. But it's meant to be fast, and the bar's not actually going to move up. It basically just stays there, and you push your body down. And if you start slowing down, then it's too heavy. You're defeating the purpose of the movement. It can be helpful to put those movements in front of a snatch. A lot of times you can put them anywhere, but I like to put them in the beginning and develop that confidence and speed under the bar, and then have them do snatches and hope that there's transfer. But those variations add speed that just doing overhead squats don't. And there's a reason that you don't see highly trained weightlifters doing a lot of just overhead squatting, because overhead squats are never overly heavy, so they're not overloading the system like front squats or back squats, and they're also slow. So they're not really ecologically valid to the velocity of a snatch. For beginners, intermediates maybe, they're great for just establishing positions, strengthening positions, but for the weightlifter who's highly trained, who already has the positions, the overhead squat becomes less useful. So in the same way, for a beginner, they might have kind of maxed out the qualities of the overhead squat. Now they need to add a speed component to that, and that's where the snatch balances can be really useful. But that's not to take the place of your deliberate practice just during your snatch training itself. Learning a new skill is going to be frustrating. It's going to be tedious. There's no magic bullet for any of this stuff. But those two things, deliberate practice with the snatches, big bang for buck, and then choosing variations that kind of hones in on the quality that you believe is the rate limiter. In this case, kind of coordination, confidence, speed, getting out of the bar, timing, getting out of the bar. These things can really help. One more variation that I think is super useful is, I call it like a 3-rep snatch, 4-rep snatch. You can do 3 reps per set, 4 reps per set, but the first repetition, you fixate the bar overhead in a high catch position, a high power position, which is what this person would do. It's what they're comfortable. That's their sweet spot, right? They're like, oh, cool. And then the second rep, you extend hard and you power snatch, but you catch it deliberately with your hips a little lower. Not a full squat, but lower than the first repetition. And then the third repetition is lower still. And then the fourth repetition is a full snatch. But on all 4 reps, you extend the same way, and you are just dictating how low you pull under the bar. And it's really helpful to establish control with that third pull. You being in charge of pulling under the bar, it's really helpful to get the timing of the elbow lockout and your receiving position from a foot standpoint, like a stance standpoint. Really good for just the timing of that and getting them to be able to feel and control where they're catching the bar. So that's something, that's just snatching, that's power snatching to full snatching. So that's a really, really nice way to incorporate lots of reps with deliberate practice. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have a problem catching high when the weight gets heavier, or you want to be able to receive your snatches lower, I think these tips will help. But just know it's a process and many weeks and months of work, and all of a sudden you kind of look back and you're like, oh wow, I snatched 90 today. And when we were having this conversation, my 1 rep max was 80, and it was super sketchy. So you just make sure you can zoom out and give yourself some credit and just have fun with the process. So Technique Tuesday, hope that was helpful. We'll see you next time.